Welcome to Thought Frontier.
Today, we're diving headfirst into a topic that's baffled even the brainiest philosophers and scientists: synchronicity. You know, those head-scratching moments when the universe seems to be sending you a message. We're going to unpack whether those coincidences are just random flukes or if there's something bigger at play.
Yeah, it's a question that really speaks to the very nature of reality and how we each fit into its grand design.
You've sent over some fascinating excerpts on synchronicity. We're talking meaningful coincidences, those what are the chances moments we've all experienced. Let's start with the basics. What exactly do we mean when we talk about synchronicity?
Well, imagine you're thinking about a friend you haven't seen in ages, and bam, they call you out of the blue. Coincidence? Maybe. But synchronicity suggests something deeper. It's not just that these events happen together, it's that they seem connected in a way that defies logic. It's almost like they're hinting at a hidden order beneath the surface of everyday life.
So it's not cause and effect, like one event directly causing another.
Right.
Is it more like an invisible hand orchestrating these meaningful coincidences?
Not quite an invisible hand, but perhaps more like a shared meaning that links these events. Think of it this way. Two clocks striking the hour at the exact same moment, but with no physical connection between them. They're synced, but not because one caused the other. Synchronicity operates in a similar way. But instead of clocks, we're talking about events in our lives.
Okay, that makes sense. But sometimes those clocks just seem to align in a way that's too specific to ignore, right? Like, what are the chances?
Exactly. And to illustrate this, let's look at a historical example that really drives this home. It's from the Synchronicity, Causality, and Acausality excerpt. And it involves the Swedish theologian and scientist Emanuel Swedenborg. In 1759, Swedenborg was hundreds of miles away from Stockholm when he suddenly had a vision.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. A vision, you say?
Yes, a vivid vision of a fire engulfing Stockholm. He described the scene to witnesses in detail, including the location of the fire and even the specific house where it stopped. Now, what's remarkable is that news later reached Swedenborg, confirming that a fire had indeed ravaged Stockholm, matching his vision with astonishing accuracy.
Wow. That's not just a lucky guess. Some might say it's just the law of averages, that given enough time, any coincidence can happen. Like, if you flip a coin long enough, you're bound to get a long streak of heads eventually.
Sure, that's the argument of the law of large numbers.
Yeah.
But the Swedenborg case, and others like it, really challenged that explanation. The odds of him visualizing not just a fire, but that specific fire, with those details, at that exact moment, it goes way beyond probability.
It's like winning the lottery 3 times in a row with the same numbers you dreamt about. It makes you wonder if there's something more at play.
Precisely. And there's another argument against the "it's just coincidence" explanation, the idea of retrieval cues. This theory suggests that we only remember coincidences when something triggers our memory of them. But that doesn't explain those striking synchronicities that just seem to hit us out of the blue, those moments that we couldn't have predicted or forgotten.
It's like the universe is trying to tell us something, but we need to learn its language.
And what's fascinating is that these synchronicities might be offering us a glimpse into a deeper order underlying reality, one that operates beyond our usual understanding of cause and effect.
Okay, I'm intrigued. But how do we even begin to understand this deeper order? I'm ready to decode the language of the universe.
Well, this is where the work of Carl Jung becomes essential. He's the one who coined the term synchronicity and really gave us a framework for understanding it. Jung believed that these meaningful coincidences are often tied to powerful universal patterns he called archetypes.
Archetypes. I've heard that term before. Remind me what those are all about.
Think of archetypes as these ancient, unconscious blueprints for common human experiences. They're like universal stories we carry within us, shaping our thoughts, behaviors, even how we see the world.
So like the hero, the wise old sage, the trickster, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Those classic figures and themes we see throughout history, in myths, religions, stories. Jung said these archetypes actually live in our collective unconscious, this deep well of shared human experience that we all tap into.
Okay, I'm starting to see how this connects. So you're saying that when we experience a synchronicity, it's like an archetype is being activated in our unconscious, and that somehow spills out into the external world.
It's like the archetype acts as a tuning fork. When an event or situation in your life resonates with that archetype, it's like that tuning fork starts to vibrate. And sometimes that vibration can manifest as a synchronistic event in your reality.
Wow, that's pretty wild. So it's not just that the events are connected, it's the shared meaning, the archetypal resonance that links them together.
You got it. Meaning is at the heart of synchronicity. It's not just about things happening simultaneously. It's about them happening in a way that speaks to something deeper within you, often reflecting your current state of mind or the challenges you're facing.
This is making me think about all those times I've encountered the same symbol or number over and over again. It always felt like more than just coincidence.
Exactly. And it leads to a really interesting question. Can something as personal and subjective as synchronicity actually be studied scientifically? Can we measure meaning?
Good point. It's not like we can just put synchronicity under a microscope.
It's definitely a challenge, but not impossible. Jung himself actually tried to explore this scientifically with an astrological experiment, described in that Synchronicity, Causality, and Acausality excerpt. He was looking for correlations between astrological signs and marriage partners.
Astrology. So we're venturing into the zodiac now.
Hold on, it gets even more interesting. While the overall results of Jung's experiment were statistically weak, there were some fascinating findings. He observed that for individual subjects, the astrological data often mirrored their psychological states, even though the astrologers interpreting the charts didn't know anything about them personally.
So it's like the astrology was picking up on those unconscious patterns, those archetypes, that were relevant to each person's life.
That's one way to interpret it, and that's what Jung found so compelling. It hints at a connection between our inner world, our unconscious minds, and the seemingly random events we encounter in the outer world.
Okay, so that's one attempt to study synchronicity. Were there any other researchers who tried to tackle this?
Absolutely. In fact, the Synchronicity, Causality, and Occausality excerpt also mentions some fascinating experiments by a researcher named William Broad. He took a more quantitative approach to studying meaningful coincidences.
Quantitative, huh? So he was crunching numbers to track down synchronicity. What did he do?
Well, in one experiment, he selected key words that held strong personal meaning for him. Then he matched those words with control words that appeared with a similar frequency in everyday language. Broad then went about his day, paying attention to how often he encountered each type of word.
Okay, I think I know where this is going. He probably ran into those meaningful keywords way more often than the control words, right?
You guessed it. The results were statistically significant, suggesting that those key words, the ones imbued with personal meaning, were popping up with a frequency that defied mere chance.
That's wild. It's like our intentions or expectations could actually be influencing the world around us.
That's one possible interpretation. Broad even conducted another experiment using newspapers, where he found that he encountered specific words he had chosen much faster than control words. These experiments, while not definitive proof, suggest that synchronicity might be more open to scientific inquiry than we previously thought.
It's like there's this hidden language of the universe, and Broad was starting to decipher it. This whole concept of correlations between our inner states and external events is mind-blowing. But what about those times when it feels like the connection is broken? Those really strange, almost inexplicable experiences people report, like out-of-body experiences? Where do those fit in?
You're right, it's kind of a different angle, isn't it? We've been talking about this excess correlation, like in synchronicity. But what about those times when the connection seems to flip the other way? Those exceptional experiences that really make you question what we even consider normal.
So we're talking about those experiences that go beyond everyday coincidences. Like, are we talking about out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, even just those moments where you feel completely disconnected from reality?
Exactly. The Pauli-Jung conjecture and its relatives reading really dives into this, suggesting that instead of just meaningful coincidences, there's a whole spectrum of mind-matter connections, from the ordinary to the extraordinary. They actually make this distinction between what they call structural correlations and induced correlations.
Okay, break that down for me. What's the difference?
Well, think of structural correlations as like those everyday connections we rely on. So if you eat something unhealthy, you might get a stomach ache, cause and effect. But induced correlations, those are the outliers, the anomalies. That's where things get really interesting. They propose that these induced correlations can be divided into two main categories. Coincidence phenomena, where things seem even more connected than usual, and then you have dissociation phenomena.
So coincidence phenomena, that would be like the synchronicities we've been discussing, right? Those moments where the universe seems to wink at you.
Precisely. And then dissociation phenomena, that's like the flip side. It's as if the normal connection between mind and body gets disrupted, leading to those experiences like out-of-body experiences, near-death experiences, even certain altered states of consciousness.
So it's like the volume knob on these correlations is getting turned way up with coincidence and turned way down with dissociation.
What a fantastic way to put it.
Yeah.
And what's even more intriguing is that they break down these exceptional experiences even further into 4 distinct types. And get this, each type has its own level of what they call meaning intensity.
Meaning intensity.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got to tell me more about these 4 types. I'm hooked.
Well, they call them coincidence, dissociation, intrusion, and deficit experiences. So coincidence and dissociation, we've already kind of touched on those a little bit.
Right.
Intrusion experiences are when it feels like something from the outside is impacting your inner world, almost like an invasion of your senses or thoughts. Imagine feeling this sudden wave of emotion that seemed to come out of nowhere, or hearing a voice that no one else can hear.
Okay, that's getting a little spooky, but I get it. What about deficit experiences?
So think of it as the opposite of intrusion. Deficit experiences involve this lack of expected mental or physical response. So like if you were expecting to feel pain, but for some reason you don't, it's that disconnect between expectation and reality.
So all these really wild experiences, from meaningful coincidences to out-of-body sensations, they all fall under this umbrella of induced correlations.
Exactly. And the more intense the experience, the richer the meaning it tends to hold for the person going through it. Think about it. Those moments that shake us to our core, that challenge our understanding of reality, those are the ones that often lead to the most profound personal insights and transformations.
That makes sense. But I'm curious, how does all of this connect back to what we were exploring earlier about archetypes and their role in synchronicity?
Great question. You see, some researchers propose that the specific type of archetypal pattern that's activated might actually influence the kind of exceptional experience a person has. For instance, someone who is grappling with a significant loss might be more susceptible to synchronicities related to grief or their departed loved one. It's like those archetypal energies are amplified during those times, making us more sensitive to those connections, those echoes in the universe.
So it's like these archetypes are a framework for understanding not just our ordinary lives, but those extraordinary experiences that just defy explanation. Is there any research to support this idea that we might be wired to perceive these connections?
There is. The Jung conjecture and its relatives excerpt mentions some fascinating research by a researcher named Thomas Wess. He found that individuals who frequently experience synchronicities, they also tend to see patterns in completely random visual tasks.
So it's like their tendency to find meaning, to connect the dots, it extends even to situations where there is no inherent meaning to be found. That's fascinating.
It really makes you think. It suggests that there might be variations in how attuned people are to these underlying correlations, how easily they can spot those winks from the universe.
It's as if some of us have a stronger antenna for picking up on those subtle signals, those whispers of something beyond the everyday. It really challenges us to reconsider what we believe about reality, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It invites us to consider that the universe might be far more interconnected, far more meaningful than we tend to assume. Synchronicity reminds us to pay attention to those seemingly random events, those uncanny coincidences, and to remain open to the possibility that they might be guiding us towards a deeper understanding of ourselves and our place in the grand tapestry of existence.
It's like we're all part of this cosmic dance, and those synchronicities, those moments of alignment, they're invitations to step onto the dance floor and join in.
What a beautiful way to put it. And it highlights the true magic of synchronicity. It reminds us that we are active participants in creating our reality, that meaning isn't something we simply find, but something we actively generate through our intentions, our attention, and our willingness to embrace the mystery.
It makes you wonder, if we were to approach life with a greater sense of openness, a deeper awareness of the interconnectedness of all things, would we start to experience even more of these synchronicities?
That's the real question, isn't it? What if our intentions and expectations could influence the occurrence of these meaningful coincidences? It's a tantalizing thought, and one that I encourage you to explore in your own life.
So to our listeners, we'll leave you with this final thought. What synchronicities have you experienced, and what message did the universe whisper to you through those moments? Keep your eyes open, your minds curious, and your hearts receptive to the magic that unfolds when we dare to pay attention. Until next time, happy exploring.